So I promised this won't become a drama channel, but a few of you have been wondering where the hell I've been, which is fair enough, and I wanted to let you know that the video is going to be a little bit delayed. And you might wonder why. Well, I got arrested by the terror police when I arrived back in the UK, which, yeah, I did a post about it on Twitter. And a lot of people had questions, so I thought the best way to answer all the frequently asked questions would just to be, do a short video about the whole ordeal. So let's begin. So I was filming in the US and then El Salvador because I was in the neighborhood, and then wintered with the Americans to see what average American life was like. And then arrived back in the UK to go to the e-gates, because they're faster. For people who don't know, they're the gates where you just scan your passport, and it scans your face, and then you can go through. And the e-gates refused to work, and told me to go over to the desk. Now, it's a little bit weird, because I've heard about other people in the UK who have had that problem, and then all of a sudden, that's when the police get you. So I go over to the desk, and I notice that there's a bunch of people stood behind the desks, in plain clothes, looking at me. I then go up to the immigration officer, hand him my passport. Passport fails to scan, and then the people came up and said, we'll take it from here, took my passport, and then told me they were police officers, and I was, detained under Schedule 3 of the Terrorism Act. And then taken out to a little side room, which was going to be fun. But that's not a great start to landing back in the UK after not sleeping. So you get taken to the other room, and for the Americans watching, just to explain, they don't need legal suspicion of you actually having committed any crime, because the Terrorism Act in this regard doesn't care about reasonable suspicion. So they could detain you and question you. You also have no right to remain silent, and you have the right to speak to a lawyer beforehand, but not the rights of the lawyer in the room with you, which is kind of awkward, because, of course, I don't have a lawyer, so I called up the free one they offer, and both of us asked why I was there, and then both of us had no idea. It was just a waste of time, and then we got to the interrogation section. Now, for people who wonder what having no right to remain silent means, that means you have to answer their questions, which includes, for example, the fact that they can seize all your electronic devices, which they did, including all my footage, and you have to hand over your passwords to your electronic devices. And if you don't, you are then charged with the Terrorism Act. You've committed an offense, because you're impeding their investigation, I guess. Now, this has happened to a few people that I know of, and have met. So one of them is Lauren Southern. Now, she tried to come through the southern border, through Calais, and when they detained her, they then demanded her passwords, and she told them to go screw themselves. But because she's foreign, she's a Canadian citizen, they just got annoyed with her, and then deported her, and sent her back to France. I think she's banned from the UK for life now, as well, which she doesn't see as any bad thing. But then there are people like right-wing activist Tommy Robinson and Paul Golding. Now, these are British people. They had the same treatment, and I believe Paul and Robinson both refused to hand over their passwords, but because they're natives, you can't just deport them, so they were charged with the Terrorism Act and given a terrorist charge. Now, my job is difficult enough, trying to get visas for weird places without having to explain a terrorism charge on my application, so I just handed over my devices and passwords, and then had to answer all the questions with no right to remain silent. Gotta answer them. So after getting my fingerprints done, the interrogation began, and the questions were initially focused on the trip that I'd just done around the US and El Salvador, asking exactly where I went, who I met, what I did, etc., etc. That was the one that was most in detail. And then the topic moved on to the other trips I've done, the other stamps in my passport, and going through, again, where I went, what I did, why I was there, who I met, what I thought of the place, blah, blah, blah. Which, yeah, just kind of annoying. But I told them they could have just watched the channel. Like, you could just go on the YouTube channel and watch any of the videos. Seems like a easier way of solving this, because everything is online there. But whatever. What was interesting is they're sitting there with these, like, blank A4 bits of paper, writing down everything I'm telling them, like, bits of interest. And it's exactly the same thing the Russians did when they interrogated me, which is just kind of funny, because one of the main interests they seemed to have was the trips to Russia and what I did there. And the main thrust of it, like, one of the questions was, did the Russians ever offer you compensation for work? Which, no. No, the Russians never offered me a sausage, which is the way I like it, to be honest. My interactions with the Russians have been pretty much the same as the interaction with the British government, which is an interrogation to try and find out if I'm working for the other side, which is kind of funny. Like, you go and meet the Russians, and they're suspicious that you might be working for the British, and on the other side, the British are now suspicious I'm working for the Russians, and meanwhile, I'm out here working for Greatest Zimbabwe, and nobody knows. Now, a few people thought that this might have had something to do with the trip to Afghanistan, and meeting the Taliban there, and interviewing them at the parade they had, which would have made sense, right? Terrorism police, you go meet the Taliban, you're British, so, what are you doing? When I came back from Afghanistan, that was what I was expecting, to have to go and, talk to someone and be like, yeah, I didn't join the jihad. Just letting you know. No, didn't care. Literally 0% interest in the trip to Afghanistan and the Taliban. Which, if you count terrorism police, seems like the sort of thing you'd be more interested in, not less, but that's how that went. Just not interested in that aspect of the whole thing. So after dealing with the last of the stamps in my passport, the conversation then went on to ask me my entire life story. So where I was born, what schools I went to, what I did for university, what jobs that I'd had, who would I work for, blah, blah, blah. And then the question went on to my finances, where is my money, where are my sources of money, where am I keeping it, what am I storing it in, etc. And then the conversation became more serious as it got into the far more serious and dangerous topic of my opinions. Yeah, what's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on that? So I was asked my opinion on Russia, which was pretty pointless. I mean, again, just go watch the channel. It's my opinion is go and have a look at Russia. It looks like that. That's it. It's not really opinion, more of just there's the facts. And then I was asked about the war in Ukraine and my opinion on their fight for freedom. And then finally, the main interesting questions being, what do I think about the UK? What do I think about the UK's policies, the West in general? And yeah, that's the ones where it just kind of gets weird as to why you're asking me all that. Keep in mind, I hadn't slept for 30 hours, and then the interrogation was 4 hours long, so I wasn't having the greatest of time. But then after they'd asked me about all my opinions on the West, and were satisfied, I was allowed to go. Except not with my electronic devices. Those are all being kept for the maximum legal allowance of 7 days, that they can just hold on to them. So because they'd taken my phone, I actually had my train ticket and my rail card on that phone, so now I couldn't do that, so I then had to buy a brand new train ticket at a massively increased price. Thanks, boys. Also, because you don't have a phone, well, how are you going to contact anyone? Like, literally, payphones don't exist in the modern world, so I was talking to one of the officers, and he was like, oh, when you get to the train station, you can call up the guys to pick you up with, oh yeah, payphones don't exist anymore, do they? I was like, no, they don't. Thanks, buddy. So, that was a laugh. And then they kept all my footage, so I was basically forced on a 7-day holiday. So I've been doing bugger all. Don't feel like that's entirely my fault, though, I'll be honest. I did manage to get a laugh out of the lady, though, because she was asking, for example, do you have a Twitter account? Do you have Blue Sky? Which, not very well known. So they said, no, I don't have Blue Sky. I don't have the Little Red Book app either. Which she managed to laugh at, so yay. Thankfully, they kept the devices for the maximum allowance of 7 days, and then I was allowed to pick them up. They can keep them indefinitely if they find any evidence of you engaging in criminal terrorist activity. Not a terrorist, though. So no, just didn't find nothing. I suppose the question is what to make of all this, and I think first and foremost, this is just a reminder to everyone who is a British citizen or not, when you're entering and exiting a British port of entry, you don't have much in the way of rights, fundamentally. Like, you can just pull this, and there's not really much you can do. Suck it up. So, keep that in mind. I mean, a few people joked that I should go over to France next time, and then come across on a dinghy, because then I won't be hassled. Given who is probably monitoring my activity, I have no comment on that suggestion. Although, this is just a pretty good piece of advice, which is that if you're going to go through a port of entry, you don't actually have the right to your electronic devices. They could be seized like this. And keep that in mind. Might want to invest in a travel phone or something like that, so you can get screwed over if you're going through a British airport or port. I mean, it's just another thing to worry you when you're on holiday trying to relax, but it's what it is. A lot of people had the suspicion that this might have something to do with my political opinions, which wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I mean, I wouldn't surprise any other British person either. In the UK, if people don't know, we arrest 3,000 people every single year, over 3,000. for offensive comments online. There's nothing criminal, you've just been offensive. You'd be offensive to people, that's a crime in the UK. So, there's that. There's also the fact that loads of writers and journalists have had this treatment in our country, and the UK government does seem to be kind of feeling threatened right now. So, I'm just going to leave that there. So I try and keep the channel politically neutral if I can, because when you're a guest in someone else's country, their politics aren't really my problem either. I mean, it's cool to learn about whatever is going on there and then explain their perspective on the whole thing. You know, try and get something different, because that's neat. But it's not really my issue to solve, is usually my answer to most of these things. And when it comes to the UK, though, I'm a bit of a critic of the UK government, and I don't think they're a fan of me either. I have to say thank you to all the Americans who have offered me offers of marriage, including gay marriage, to get a green card. Appreciate the sentiment. But for now, I think I'm going to get back to work and try and get the next couple of videos out, so we'll see El Salvador and New Vegas soon enough. And, yeah, just thanks to everyone who supports the channel on Subscribestar again. You're the ones who make this possible. And, I just keep putting up with this sort of thing, I guess. Well, I guess if the Terror Police are watching, my message to you is like and subscribe.